Hello. In this series entitled The Law of Karma, Destiny and Choice, today we will be looking at karma, doubt and suspicion. This is something that has plagued us throughout our lives, and today we will be asking Sister Denise, a yogi who has been practicing Raj Yoga meditation with the Brahma Kumaris, for some answers as to why we have become this way and how to cure us of this ailment, and also what is the impact of the karma on our shoulders if we have such traits. Hello, Sister Denise. Welcome back.
Hello, Magla. Thank you.
Karma, doubt and suspicion. Let's start with the second one. To doubt one's self, what is the price that I pay for that?
I don't really think you doubt yourself, but other people doubt your motives. And when they say something about that, they are presenting themselves that they know what's going on inside you better than you. That is really quite toxic. You have to have a lot of strength of character and self-esteem not to buy into that. So it's a form of manipulation.
So the seeds of self-doubt are sown by others' vision and words and behavior towards you. So one is to be quite smart and vigilant to ensure that that doesn't happen.
To detect when somebody is manipulating you that way, because there are people who actually are quite weak and they cover it by presenting themselves as smarter, cleverer, more subtle, more intuitive, etc. than you, because they're very uncomfortable when they sense that you're better than them in terms of you're more intelligent, you're cleaner in your motivations, etc., etc., because the world is competitive. I think this is also something that happens between men and women. A man gets very uncomfortable if he wants to come close to a woman who is sharper than him, more qualified than him, wealthier than him, etc. It makes him feel very uncomfortable. So he will do that to make her put herself down in comparison with him so that he can feel better about himself. And if he really is drawn to her, then he will most likely start to doubt her motives, doubt her loyalty, doubt this, doubt that, doubt the other. And this will really create a problem in the relationship, and it will finish.
What is the karmic return of doing that to somebody, sowing such seeds of doubt?
It may be someone that they would really like to be close to, but they don't feel comfortable unless they're in a dominant position. By doing this kind of behavior, they will lose that person, because that person will turn around and walk away.
Suspicion. One encounters individuals who are extremely suspicious by nature of everyone and everything. I know more than one individual who lives by the principle, trust nobody.
To me, to be that much untrusting, on one side, a big character defect, and on the other side, it's maybe a reaction to having been badly betrayed or something like this, that you just will not trust anyone. And that means that's a person who's isolated, because you cannot have a relationship without trusting. My policy is you trust until you find any sign that you shouldn't trust, which will come pretty quickly if you're astute. I think that's much more healthy than, everyone is guilty until proven innocent.
Yes, that kind of goes against the profession that I belong to.
Exactly. But there are people who just assume that everyone is their enemy.
Yeah.
And so they will be all the time, having their back to the wall. They will always sit somewhere where they can see the whole room. They will ask again and again and again for some kind of loyalty. They will go beyond what's correct in normal relationships, and they will push people away. and they will end up all by themselves. That will not be good.
You get individuals who are always on the defensive and quite often on the offensive. What's with that?
To me, I think there has to be a component of trauma in there, and childhood trauma. To become normal again, the person will really have to go through some process of deconstructing their defense system so that they do allow people to come close. I mean, you have your privacy because it's normal to keep part of yourself to yourself. That's your prerogative. But I think that when you do have a very deep, close personal relationship, gradually you take down the walls, and there is a much greater openness with the person that you're close to. Sometimes it takes more time, some people will do it quickly, but there are some who just refuse to do it at all, and I think this is very much connected with big trauma. So then the person needs psychological help.
Coming back to the doubters, what if one grew up in a household or as a child in which you were treated in such a way that it caused you to really doubt yourself? A lot of individuals are sitting with that obvious and residual damage.
Yeah.
So much so that the individual has a very compromised sense of identity because of the negative feedback he or she received as a child. So if you are now into your adulthood, having experienced that as a child, how do you rectify? Can you self-correct?
Probably it'll always be there as a shadow, because something that you experience in childhood is deeply ingrained. One thing that happens, what psychologists have researched, is the trauma that happens to a gifted child. Someone who's super intelligent will not behave the way highly intelligent people behave, and so their parents, teachers and other adults around them will think there's something seriously wrong with their intelligence and will treat them as if they're really stupid, and will tell them that, and will tell them that they're, slow, and they will find thousands of faults. In fact, that child is light years ahead of them, but they're just on pretty much different planets. So it's very, very damaging for the child, because the child doesn't get that he or she is gifted. They just want to be normal, and they're being treated as being subnormal when in reality they're supernormal. And so to heal from that is quite a big, long journey. And that will also make them doubt themselves. Another thing they will doubt is if they've been put down by 90% of the people, and then one person sort of recognizes them and treats them as they should be treated, they will doubt that, because what's wrong with you? How come you're not like the other people and seeing me as this other thing? How come you can recognize me? It's like it becomes almost dangerous because it's new territory. So the person doesn't know what to do when they are actually seen and actually recognized. On the one hand, it's the best thing because finally somebody saw me, but on the other hand, what is this? What do I do? How do I handle this? It makes them feel endangered, so they will hide away.
So what you are saying is that someone can shift from that stance of self-doubt by?
They have to do a pretty big journey. A lot of psychological work is needed because it's abuse they're suffering from. And the people who are doing that have no clue that they're being abusive because they do not see what's in front of them. They're blind because it's so different, so unusual. And this is the trauma of the gifted child. And if that child is fortunate that they're recognized, fairly well by their community, then they will really soar. You may be in a gathering where If you are a good bureaucrat, that's considered very good. If you're compliant, that's considered very good. You fit in, that's very good. But if you're highly, highly talented in an area that those people are not interested in, you will be badly treated. And this will undermine your ability to develop your talent. And that would be a form of cruelty. So then that person has to heal from that kind of cruelty, which is not easy, because those people cannot for the life of them see that the way they're behaving is cruel. It doesn't matter how much you explain to them, they just don't get it. And so that person is on their own in the face of this normal behavior that's actually quite damaging. But I think that the sort of normal people will find the specially gifted person very suspicious, because they will ascribe motivations to that person that are very demeaning and insulting and hurtful, thinking that they're so clever and smart that they've figured out that this highly gifted person is really highly devious, and actually are not devious at all. But it's just a total inability to read people. And this happens when you have cross-cultural situation.
In what way?
If you have people who are used to their particular culture and they have very little or no exposure to other cultures, they will assume that anything about the person of another culture that's different from theirs is bad, and that there's something wrong with that person, so they doubt that person, they're suspicious of that person, and they cannot get the idea that this person belongs to a different culture, they have different belief system, everything about their life is totally different from ours. Doesn't mean that the difference is badness, but anyone who's different in very conservative circles, difference equals badness.
That's a heavy burden to bear.
It is, and there's karma connected with it. So you get people who are very conservative and very proud of their attitudes, and they have all kinds of reason to feel that they're the only good people in the world, but they do things which are damaging, so they are clocking up negative karma without realizing it, and then they don't know why bad things are happening to them. They just don't get it. You cannot really shift a person from that, because you're met with incomprehension. So when you are in the face of something like that, you just have to move on and let them handle their own karma, whatever it happens to be, but you just have to move on.
So coming back to suspicious nature, it is a very uncomfortable way to live, isn't it? To always be on guard, to never let your guard down. It's a very uncomfortable way to be.
In psychology, they call this hypervigilance.
Take us through these two aspects, doubt and suspicion, from the vantage point of body consciousness and soul consciousness.
How body conscious doubt and suspicion plays out, especially between men and women, and in very traditional patriarchal cultures, the culture says all women are liars, so therefore you should be suspicious of them. It says all women are unlikely to be loyal to you, therefore you should assume that they will be disloyal and treat them accordingly. All women are devious, so therefore watch out, they will be trying to do something and hide it and this and that. So this is the message that you find in traditional patriarchal cultures that are fundamentally misogynistic, and the men who grow up in that have no clue that they have that. They will think, oh, I'm very liberal, I support women, this, that, but in reality they're very imbued with these attitudes but unaware. And this is a kind of ego. So when you take up spiritual practice, and particularly you take up this practice of being genderless, then you have to face this gender bias that has been programmed into you so that you can detect the programming.
Are bias, doubt and suspicion connected?
Yes.
I didn't know that. I'm sure this must come as news to most viewers.
Well, because it's not just doubt, it's irrational doubt.
Okay, you have to explain that.
You know, people have irrational fears.
Yes, yes.
So an irrational fear is there's nothing obvious that you should be afraid of, so that makes it irrational. The same way with doubt and suspicion. The only reason you're doubting and suspicion is because you've been brainwashed. Otherwise there's no evidence. No evidence. But the brainwashing causes you to have dysfunctional capacity for rational thinking. And you become an irrational misogynist.
Oh,
That's dangerous.
Yeah, that's a lot of words. Yes. So a man who irrationally hates all women.
But desires all women, needs all women, loves all women, cannot survive without feminine energy, but hates it. It's a very common phenomenon. And this is the foundation of cruelty to women. And there's a lot of crimes against women that people wonder, you know, how out of the blue did this person do this thing to this woman without provocation, zero provocation. Very often they will claim that the woman provoked them, but when you look at the CCTV footage or you look at the details, it's completely out of the blue. And that comes from the culture, not from anything else. And the culture is gender biased.
Doubt and suspicion, is it related to violence?
Yeah. Now, the same thing will happen with children. Doubt and suspicion against children, also due to bias against children, which also comes from the culture, which is also brainwashing, and it's usually got a religious origin. Children should be seen and not heard. Why? Children are subhuman. Excuse me. Were you not a child once? Oh yes, whatever was done to me, I will do to them. So there is that. They will carry any abuse that was done to them and then they'll give it to the next generation with interest. So this is why I think a very important thing, which I've been mentioning again and again, is to challenge the foundations of current culture, because it's got a lot of toxicity in it. And I think that this is a very good time to rethink it, because at the present time, as we mentioned earlier, the Me Too campaign, all of the things that are coming out about violence against women and violence against children, violence against indigenous people, all of this rooted in the cultural and religious priming of people from childhood. Even slavery comes from the same thing. That was challenged, but it's a lot of work over a long period of time to challenge this. And in India, the women's emancipation movement has been working for 150 years, longer than for anywhere else. Hasn't really made much of a dent.
And why not?
Because prevailing social attitudes rooted in very ancient culture are practically impossible to shift. And India is a country which had been invaded by other cultures over 1,000 years, and so they've had 1,000 years to resist any kind of other ideas. So it's very, very strong.
We have individuals who doubt themselves. Then there are those who doubt others. Then we have individuals who are suspicious of everyone and everything around them. And you give us detailed explanation of both those scenarios. I want to know how you heal from that using your spiritual practice.
I think it's very difficult to heal from that because the wound is very deep, very, very deep, because it is committed by people who you have learned to consider honorable, which makes you doubt yourself, because the whole world is one way and you're another way. How are you going to think that you're correct and everybody else is not correct? But there are occasions where it is like that. But to heal from it, you have to really study where these toxic attitudes come from. You have to understand clearly that they are toxic and that the people who have perpetrated them on you are kind of victims of their culture, and that the culture itself is toxic. And then you see you don't have any anchor, because normally you have to be anchored in your culture. But if your culture is biased against you and you realize it, then you don't have an anchor. So therefore, if you can have a personal relationship with God, that becomes an anchor. And if you have a strong feeling about your own integrity and purity, that's an anchor. But you have to be absolutely independent, because otherwise you're like something floating in the ocean, no anchor. So it's difficult.
Do not become a derelict.
But if you're made into a derelict?
Because you say healing is so difficult. If somebody is adrift, is derelict, should that person then try and find an anchor, or let down their own anchor at a port that works for them?
They can find one like that. But what I think they can do is, there are many stories that have been either written as books or put into the form of film, which describe the stories of people in that situation and who were able to get through it. So these stories are going to enable that person to find an anchoring, because they know that they're not the only one. That, I think, is a good port to anchor into.
Traits like doubting oneself, doubting others, being suspicious of everybody is a sign of trauma, and if an individual really wants to, they can and will heal from it. Obviously it'll be a lifelong journey,
Yes.
but it's doable.
It is doable.
So the criteria that is needed to heal is willingness. One of them is willingness. The others are?
I think the main one is not giving up on yourself.
Yeah, it's amazing how often in this series we come back to that one point.
And I think a person who has to go through all these terrible things and at the same time not giving up on themselves, they will arrive at some kind of greatness which is extraordinary, because of having got through all these trials.
That is an extremely positive and upbeat note on which to bring today's talk to an end. Thank you. I must admit I'm quite surprised as to how much Sister Denise has had to share on doubting either the self or others, as well as what's behind having a suspicious nature and how it relates to karma. So I hope that you have learned something from this talk that you are able to use and apply in your life. And I loved Sister Denise's last words: do not give up on yourself. Very powerful message, very powerful. Take care and goodbye.